After months and months of waiting, the game of the year in college basketball has finally arrived.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing the game of the year in college basketball. That's right, Kentucky versus Arkansas. Coach Calipari returns to his old stomping grounds. Will the Cats pull it off? Going to dive into the matchups today. Going to talk about the mental aspect of this contest. It's something that both of these coaches have kind of focused on as we lead up closer to this game. Going to give you my thoughts on the matchup and where Kentucky is at right now. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app. You can create an account. You can use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get into it. It's the game of the year. We're finally here. This has been months and months and months and months waiting for this game to finally arrive. When Mark Pope was hired as head coach of the Kentucky Wildcats, one of the biggest topics coming out of it, outside of what exactly he was going to do in terms of putting together a roster, was how is he going to fare against Kentucky's old coach, who has now taken the job with the Arkansas Razorbacks. And I think heading into this one, and this is the big topic that I've got here written down to start, this has to mean something to both of these coaches. This game, previewing it here, it has to matter to both of these coaches for a variety of reasons. And I understand all of the talk. I understand Big Blue Nation online getting excited about this. I understand Coach Cal and Mark Pope talking a game, right? They're talking a big game about how much this one matters to both fan bases, how much it matters that he's coming back, how weird it's going to be walking in the wrong door, how it's going to be with the interaction with fans, how much these supporters of him still care about Kentucky. I understand the talk about how much it matters, but the game itself has to show some sort of significance to both of these coaches whenever we watch it. And I think that's going to be shown through the play of their players. Something that Coach Cal did so well during his time at Kentucky is, yes, he wasn't the best X's and O's head coach. Yes, he wasn't the best when it came to in-game decisions and things like that, but what he did is he motivated and he got his players ready. If you don't think that Coach Cal has got his players ready for this one, I do not know what to tell you. He's talked a little bit about it generically online about how he's going to get, obviously, Kentucky's transfers that are on his roster ready for this game, about how he's getting ready for it, about kind of how he's thinking about it going into it, just preparing mentally. You know, out of all the things that Coach Cal did well during his time with the Cats, one of them was getting players up for big games and motivating them, especially for the first 7-8 years of his tenure. It has to be shown tomorrow night, the desire to win, and I think that needs to be reciprocated by Mark Pope and his squad. And something that Kentucky has struggled with all season long is not getting up for the games, frankly, that don't matter. And I put that in air quotes because they've beaten some of the best competition college basketball has to offer. Duke, Florida, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Gonzaga, who is really cooking in the WCC right now. Kentucky's won a lot of really big games, but they've also lost a ton of really head-scratching contests. Clemson, Ohio State. You also have that loss to Vanderbilt recently that Kentucky probably should have found a way to win. This is a team that has not gotten up for the games that they were favored in or games that weren't against, frankly, ranked opponents. And here you see a team in Arkansas coming in down 11.5 according to Vegas. Kentucky almost 12-point favorites in this contest. You got to get up for this one. And I think Mark Pope has to understand that, and he has to communicate that to his players and give them that energy and that spark and that desire. All of this to say about the energy, about the arrival, about the weirdness surrounding this matchup with Kentucky's former head coach. You know everything about this matchup. But here's the clear thing about this. And I don't think there's any debating this. Arkansas cannot beat Kentucky if Kentucky plays well. Duh. They cannot beat Kentucky if the Cats play average basketball. And this is something, if I'm not mistaken, host of Locked On Razorbacks, John Neighbors, said himself. We tried to get Neighbors on the show, by the way. I reached out to him. Could not get him to come on, which is disappointing. I know a lot of you wanted to have him on the show to kind of talk about this game. I'm sorry. I tried. But even he has said, look, the Hogs can't beat the Cats if Kentucky even plays an average game of basketball. And I think the metrics would also agree with that. If Kentucky is average defensively, if they are average to their standards offensively, this is a game that Kentucky does win by 7 to 12 plus points. Now, I do want to go back to, again, how much this means to both Coach Cal and both Mark Pope. There are going to be some weird things that happen in this game that maybe you look at the final score and you go, okay, that was a lot closer than we thought it would be. Okay, that was weirder than we thought it would be. Oh my gosh, Kentucky lost? Unbelievable. How could that possibly happen? And it can simply be explained by the emotions and the mental aspect of it and what's at stake here. I think for Kentucky, honestly, if you're talking about who needs this win more, frankly, it's Kentucky. I think this, in a way, is a proof of concept game for Mark Pope. You simply cannot lose this game. For one, it's a proof of concept that you can come in and you can beat the old coach with your style of play and with your entirely new roster. And then second off, you cannot have this blemish on your resume heading into the NCAA tournament. Most recent episode of the show, we talked about how important it is for Kentucky to make sure that they're above the 5 seed line in the NCAA tournament once they get in. They're currently projected to be a 3 after that massive win on the road against Tennessee. You can't lose this one because it would be the first quad 2 loss of the season for Kentucky, and it would take them out of that, I guess, A- tier of national title contenders. At least that's what the national media is saying right now. You can't lose this one for pride. You can't lose this one for proof of concept, and you can't lose this one for your resume. It would be very bad to lose a game like this at home. So, with that being said, what does the matchup exactly look like? Of course, we've talked a lot about how Cal should be received in Rupp Arena. If you want to go look at my thoughts on that, it's both on the YouTube feed and the podcast feed if you're listening there. We've talked a lot about Cal coming in. We've talked about how maybe the emotions surround it. Let's dive into the actual X's and O's because, again, Arkansas is really, really struggling. And frankly, again, if Kentucky plays like they should in Rupp, you may see a bit of an interesting game here from the Cats, making a statement possibly. We'll dive into that in just a second. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is simply an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. And this year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I've used Game Time Picks so much over the past few years to not just go to NFL playoff games. I've also used it for college football. I've used it for college basketball. I've used it for MLB when I want to go see the Braves, which, by the way, super excited that baseball season is coming back. I'll get the opportunity to use Game Time again. I've also used it for comedy, theater in my area. Every single concert that I've been to for the last several years, I've gone to Game Time because it's super easy to use. They've got on-time ticket delivery. They've got seat views before you buy. They've also got prices, including fees, immediately shown, so you're not surprised by anything when you get to check out, and you can take the guesswork out of buying your tickets to any event with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. Again, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, wherever you are tuned in, first of all, again, thank you for tuning in, but subscribe. This is going to be such an interesting back half of the season for the Kentucky Wildcats. Obviously, this is the game of the year here for the Cats. Biggest contest, I think, this weekend in college basketball. And yes, I do know that North Carolina and Duke are playing. Don't tell Seth Greenberg that people outside of the state of Arkansas and the state of Kentucky care about this game. Don't tell him that. Goodness knows what the reaction could be. All right, let's go ahead and get into the X's and O's and what we know about the Hogs. They're not very good. They're 12-8 right now. They are 1-6 in conference play. Their lone win being at home against Georgia. No, that was not a quad 1 win. That was a quad 2 victory for the Hogs. They have faced some of the best competition in the SEC, and then, frankly, some mid to some of the worst competition in the SEC, namely being LSU. Georgia is kind of average. They're 3-5 so far. Oklahoma is in the dregs of the league standings, and they've lost to, again, everybody except for the Bulldogs. They got throttled by Tennessee. They lost close to Ole Miss. They lost close to Florida. They, again, got drubbed by teams like Missouri. If you want to look in the non-conference schedule, they did barely beat teams like Miami and Michigan, but that Michigan win kind of feels like a fluke. The Illinois loss, 90-77, just kind of showed what happens whenever you play with a little bit of pace against Coach Cal. Baylor, obviously, was a bit of a bad loss as well. At least Arkansas has the 109-35 win over Maryland Eastern Shore to hang their hats on. Because resume-wise, it's very, very bad for Arkansas right now. And they've just not simply been able to get anything going in SEC play. And part of that is because of the fact that their starting guard, Boogie Fland, when he was playing, just was hurt and he wasn't very efficient. And now he is out for the season. So Arkansas is kind of having to make do with a bit of a weird lineup. We know who these Cats are for Arkansas. Obviously, we know who John Calipari is. I don't have to explain to you his coaching record, his resume, anything like that. You know who we're going up against. And you also know the 3 Kentucky transfers that we are going up against as well. That would be Adou Thiero, Zvonimir Ivisic, and DJ Wagner. Apparently, it's actually pronounced Adou Thiero, which he corrected people on once he got to Arkansas. So I'll do my best to say Thiero properly here as I dive into kind of what he is in this matchup, because I believe he is Arkansas's X factor. I think he is the most important player on the floor for the Hogs. If he does not play well, I do not see a way that Arkansas can win. Over the past several games, as we've gotten into SEC play, Kentucky has struggled against teams that bring out a physical, big, wing-type player that can handle the basketball. Thiero is all of those things while shooting 64.1% inside the arc. This kid, we know who he is. He's a great rebounder. He's a phenomenal athlete. He can get up above the rim, finish with authority. He can drive. He's added a little bit more to his game this season as far as what he's doing outside. Now, again, he's not particularly efficient, but he's still hitting a couple of outside shots. He is the guy you have to monitor here. If Andrew Carr's not playing, Almanor is going to have his hands full. If Thiero is not able to play well, I really don't know what Coach Cal is going to do with this rotation, because it doesn't really seem like he's playing the right players the right amount of minutes. And then on top of this, one of the best players out of the transfer portal this offseason has just completely flopped. Before I get to Ivisic, I do want to ask, what on earth has happened to Janelle Davis? In case you don't know, Janelle Davis, 6'4", 200-pound guard, out of Florida Atlantic. He spent 4 seasons down there with the Owls, and he was very, very good last season. One of the best players in all of college ball. He had a 114 offensive rating. He shot 41% from 3. He was a great finisher at the rim at 51.5% inside the arc. He was great for what he was. He had a high assist rate. He was really good in conference play at that. And he got to the charity stripe quite a bit. This season, you have seen, I think, every major statistic and analytic dip for Janelle Davis. His offensive rating has gone down from 114 to 97.1. His three-point shot, 41% to 31.5%. He's shooting sub 50% from inside the arc. His assist rate went from 17.6% to just 8.1. His turnover rate is up as well. His offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding stats are down. His free throw rate's down. He has just completely fallen apart in the hands of Coach Cal. What exactly has happened? I personally don't really know how to describe this other than that maybe it's just a schematic thing. Maybe he just doesn't fit well with the personnel. But even then, as somebody as talented as him at Florida Atlantic, you would like to think that maybe he'd be able to find some rhythm at some point this season, and he just hasn't done it at all. Like, at all. It's kind of disappointing to see stuff like that happen. Also, to Coach Cal, for him in this roster, it really does suck because they were relying on him so much, at least in the preseason, as far as expectations went. They were relying on him to be a key aspect of this team. So Thiero is very important. Janelle Davis, as bad as he has been this year, still has the ability to go off. Absolutely does. And then the third player I want to get to here. Why does Zvonimir Ivisic not play more? Why does he not play more for the Hogs? He's averaging less than 20 minutes per game, and statistically, he's one of their best scorers. He's shooting 58% inside the arc, 41% outside the arc, which is hands down the best on the team. And he's also, if you want to go look at defensive analytics, which some of you may say, well, he doesn't play defense. Well, this is a defense that's top 35 in the nation. Ivisic is second on the team in defensive rating. He's third best in defensive box plus minus. He's third best on the team in player efficiency rating overall, and yet 8th in minutes per game. Why does he not play more? He is somebody that I think could cause problems for the Cats because Kentucky has shown a propensity to not step out on forwards that can shoot the ball. Shout out Grant Nelson. Shout out, I can't remember who it was for Vanderbilt, number 22. I think his name's Carey. If I'm not mistaken, I hate that I didn't write that down. But Kentucky does not step out on guys that can shoot the three that are like 6'8" or taller, right? They have to do that for Ivisic because Ivisic, even though he's gotten a little bit better at handling the ball this year, he's still not a driver. He's not a great finisher at the rim whenever you do kind of bump him off his line a little bit. We've seen that. We know that. You have to close out on this kid because he's going to shoot the three. So those are the three players that I'm really concerned about the most. You can talk about DJ Wagner and his impact in this game. Carter Knox, a very physical freshman who does a decent job on the boards, who is just not an efficient shooter. Trevon Brazil, which was the only returnee for Arkansas this past season. He has been really, really good inside the arc, but overall has, again, not been utilized that much. Cal just hasn't really played him a ton. I need to go look at this Oklahoma game real quick to see if he actually contributed a ton. Nope, he had 17 minutes. Again, I don't understand what Cal is doing with this rotation, and I'm getting frustrated at it as if it's my team. I would be so mad if this were my team and I were a Hogs fan. I mean, this would absolutely suck. Jonas Adou, who's been hurt a little bit, he's kind of worked his way back into the rotation. He's essentially splitting time evenly over the last several games with Ivisic at the center spot. Brazil essentially comes in as the backup 4. But again, if you're like you could slide Thiero up to the 3. You could have Wagner and Davis as your 1 and your 2. You could have Carter Knox come in off of the bench, and then you could have Brazil and Ivisic, who seem to be 2 of your most efficient players, and you could run a pretty short rotation but have some of your best players on the floor. Arkansas doesn't want to do that. I don't know why, but they don't want to. So what exactly is going to happen in this game? Well, I think first and foremost, you have to be able to ramp up the pace if you're Kentucky. You saw it benefit you on the road against Tennessee, a team that likes to play slow, a team that frankly does not have a very efficient offense. If you can speed up the game a little bit, make it a little bit more chaotic, I think it benefits you. When things do get ugly on offense for Arkansas, they tend to slow things down, and specifically speaking, they try and drive in as hard as they can, and they try and draw a foul. You can see that over and over and over and over again against Oklahoma, their most recent loss at home. You cannot let this become a free throw contest. That is going to be a major deciding factor in this game. Does Arkansas get to the free throw line on top of what Thiero does overall as a player? You have to speed this team up, and you have to keep things from you have to keep things from getting into a free throw contest. You have to stop the whistle from being blown. You cannot let stoppages in this game control and dictate the outcome. On top of this, you can't give up easy opportunities at the rim. This Arkansas team has reverted back to what Cal loved to do during his time at Kentucky, which is just get points at the rim and not really get them anywhere else. This Arkansas team, if you want to go look at what they're doing in conference play specifically, they're getting 50% of their points from the rim. They're getting more of their points from the charity stripe than they have overall this season, but man, they do not get almost any of their points from three at all, at least relative to the national average, 28.5%. It is currently. So, they like to drive. They've got some big physical guys, some of which we already know. But here's what it comes down to for me. Can they play enough defense against Kentucky to win this game? Because yes, Arkansas, if you want to go look at the KenPom numbers, they are 16th, and they're last in the SEC in 3-point percentage. They're last in the SEC in 2-point percentage. They are 12th in offensive rebound percentage. They're 11th on the defensive side of the ball. The only thing this team does well is they protect the rim. They are first in the conference in 2-point defense. That's it. Everything else, they are pretty bad at. Can they slow down Kentucky offensively? Because they are 1-7 against teams that have an adjusted offensive efficiency over 115. 1-7. Kentucky's X factor in this game is Amari Williams. You saw how well he ran the point, essentially, against UT. He's going to be asked to do that again, and I'm curious to see what players like Jonas Adou and Ivisic provide him defensively. I think Amari, frankly, because he is 20 pounds heavier than the heaviest Arkansas player, he should be able to grab boards, pass, drive in a little bit. I'm not saying that he's going to be free to do whatever he wants in this contest. I just think that he's going to have the opportunity to play well, I think. So Amari Williams is your X factor for Kentucky. Adou Thiero is your X factor for the Razorbacks. Arkansas is going to have to play some good defense to shut Kentucky down. They're going to have to slow this game down, or they're going to have to make it ugly. I guess the question here is, can they do that? I'm not going to give you a prediction for this game today. I know there's a lot of Kentucky media out there that's taken the Cats by 90 stance literally, and for their official game predictions, had Kentucky winning by an extreme margin. Kentucky's favored to win this game by somewhere between 11 and 12. I'll let you tell me. How much is Kentucky going to win or lose by? And what are your thoughts on this game overall? That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_. And you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for a big recap episode of this game. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless. Gotta beat the Hogs, man.